The dungeon is collapsing, and my own party just left me behind to die. I'm pinned under a slab of black stone, my ribs screaming, and through the dust I watch 3 people I trusted step over the rubble without even looking back. One of them is smiling. Smiling. Like watching me get crushed is a bonus, not a tragedy. Right then, I should have been thinking about survival. Instead, all I can think is, of course. Of course this is how it ends. The support gets sacrificed so the real heroes can escape clean. That's the job, right? That's what I signed up for when everyone decided my magic wasn't worth anything. My name is Rhett Calder, and 3 hours before that stone came down on my chest, I was ranked dead last in a graduating class of 41 mages. Not because I was weak, because of what kind of magic I had. There are combat mages who throw fire and lightning and get parades named after them. There are healers who get worshipped like saints. And then there's my category, the one nobody wants, the one everyone rolls their eyes at the moment it's announced. Support caster. The word alone kills a reputation in this world. A support caster buffs other people's power, shields other people's bodies, makes other people look like heroes while standing 3 steps behind them, invisible, forgettable, replaceable. When my results came back at the Academy of Aldermere, the proctor read my classification out loud to the entire hall, and I heard someone laugh before he even finished the sentence. That someone was Draven Ash, golden-haired, first in every ranking since he was 12, the kind of noble-blooded genius who gets handed a legendary weapon at birth, and somehow still acts like he earned it. He didn't even bother hiding the laugh. He just looked at me like I was something that had wandered into the wrong building. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself power isn't about the label they slap on you, it's about what you do with what you're given. I did not actually believe that, not yet. What I didn't know, standing in that hall getting laughed at, was that my bloodline carried something buried so deep even my own family had lied to me about it. A magic so old the kingdom had once tried to erase every trace of it from the history books. A magic they called impossible, because the last person who mastered it didn't just win battles. He unmade them, but that's later. First, you need to understand how bad things actually got before they got better. After graduation, support casters get assigned to dungeon clearing parties, because guilds need someone to keep the real fighters alive while they collect the glory and the gold. I got assigned to a party led by Sable Kane, an S-rank duelist with a temper as sharp as her blades and a face made for guild recruitment posters. She was everything I wasn't. Fast, feared, adored. She also made it very clear, on my very first day, that she thought I was a waste of a party slot. Wards and buffs, she said, looking me up and down like I was a broken sword someone tried to sell her. Guild put a shield boy on my team. Great, shield boy. That nickname followed me for 2 years. Our party had 5 people, Sable up front, all speed and aggression. Beside her, a lightning duelist named Torin, who never once remembered my name on purpose. Behind them, a healer named Mira Thorn, who I'd actually known since childhood, back when neither of us had a rank at all, just 2 kids in the same orphan ward in the lower district of Aldermere. Mira was the only one who ever looked at me like I was a person instead of furniture. And then there was me, standing in the back, casting wards nobody thanked me for, shielding blows nobody noticed, watching everyone else get carried out of dungeons on the guild's shoulders while I walked out quietly, unnoticed, uncounted. For 2 years, that was my life. Escalating dungeons, escalating monsters, and my rank never moving, because support casters don't get individual glory, they get attached to whoever they're serving. Sable's fame grew. Mine stayed exactly where it started. I should have quit. I almost did, twice. But every time I thought about walking away, I thought about the one thing that kept me chained to this path. My little sister. Ren was 11 years old, still in the orphan ward, still waiting for me to earn enough guild credit to buy her out of that place and into an actual home. She didn't know I was the joke of Aldermere's ranking boards. She just knew her brother was a mage, and to her, that made me the strongest person alive. I wasn't going to be the reason that stopped being true, so I kept casting wards. I kept shielding people who resented me for existing, and that brought us, eventually, to the day everything broke. The dungeon was called the Hollow Choir, an S-rank ruin buried under the northern mountains, and the guild had promised us it was the last clear we needed before Sable's party got bumped up to the kingdom's official strike team registry. Real fame, real money, a future none of us had ever touched before. We were 3 floors down when we found the vault room, and inside it, a relic core still humming with old magic. Sable's eyes lit up the second she saw it. "That's our ticket," she said. "Grab it and we're done." What none of us knew, what the guild had conveniently left out of the mission briefing, was that the relic core was bound to a seal, and pulling it loose didn't just trigger an alarm, it triggered a collapse. The ceiling cracked open like the mountain itself had exhaled, and stone the size of carriages started raining down around us. Torin went left. Sable grabbed the relic and bolted right. Mira screamed my name once, reaching for me, and Torin yanked her the other direction before she could turn back. And I understood, in that half second before the stone hit me, exactly what was happening. They weren't running from the collapse together. They were running from the collapse and leaving the person least valuable to carry the weight of the exit behind, me. The slab came down across my chest and pinned me flat against the vault floor, and through the dust and the screaming and the grinding stone, I watched 3 silhouettes disappear up the stairwell without looking back once. That's when the smiling one, Torin, glanced over his shoulder just long enough to say 4 words I will never forget. Should have picked a better class. Then he was gone, and the door sealed, and I was alone in a collapsing dungeon with a slab crushing my ribs and no one coming back for me. I want to tell you I stayed calm. I didn't. I panicked, clawed at the stone, screamed until my throat gave out, because 11-year-old Ren was still waiting in an orphan ward for a brother who might not come home. And that thought hurt worse than the crushed ribs did. And that's when something inside my chest cracked open that had nothing to do with the stone. It felt like a second heartbeat, cold, ancient, patient, like it had been waiting my entire life for exactly this moment, this level of desperation, to finally answer. A voice that wasn't mine echoed through my skull, and it said one sentence that changed everything. Finally, someone worth waking up for. The stone above me didn't crack. It disintegrated, turned to gray ash that scattered upward instead of falling, like gravity itself had gotten confused and decided to apologize. I sat up in the wreckage, completely unharmed, staring at my own hands like they belonged to a stranger, because they were glowing, not with the pale blue shimmer of a support ward, with black light, threaded through with veins of violet, pulsing in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat exactly. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew, somewhere deep in my gut, that this wasn't a support skill anymore. The system in my head, the one that had spent 2 years quietly logging my ward casts and buff durations, like a bored clerk, suddenly rewrote itself in front of my eyes. Class Support Caster. Locked. New class detected. Voidbinder. Bloodline origin. Forbidden classification. I didn't understand what Voidbinder meant, not yet. But I understood the ash floating around me used to be solid rock, and I understood that whatever had just woken up inside me did not follow the same rules as the magic I'd spent 2 years apologizing for. Here's the part where I tell you I climbed out of that vault a changed man, ready to march after the people who left me for dead. I didn't. Not immediately. The first thing I did was almost get killed again, because the ruin was still collapsing, and I had exactly zero idea how to control the power that had just cracked open inside me. I reached out toward a falling pillar without thinking, some instinct screaming at me to stop it, and instead of stopping it, I unmade it, turned 12 tons of stone into black dust in half a second, and the backlash threw me across the room hard enough to leave a bruise the size of a dinner plate. Lesson 1. This power did not come with an instruction manual. Lesson 2 came about 90 seconds later when I found the exit stairwell and discovered the collapse had sealed the main path completely. The only way out was through a side passage, guarded by something the guild briefing had absolutely, definitely not mentioned. A rank A guardian construct, built from the same black stone as the vault, easily 3 times my height, with eyes that lit up gold the moment it noticed me standing there, covered in dust with my class status glitching in my vision. 2 years ago, I would have died right there. 2 years ago, my best move was casting a ward that could maybe absorb 1 hit before shattering. This was not 2 years ago. The construct swung a fist the size of a boulder, and instead of raising a shield, I did something I still can't fully explain. Something that felt less like casting a spell, and more like reaching into the space between one moment and the next, and simply removing an option. The fist never landed. Not because I blocked it, because the arm carrying it stopped existing 3 inches from my face, erased clean at the joint, and the construct staggered back, missing a limb it hadn't realized was gone yet. I stood there breathing hard, staring at my own glowing hand, and thought exactly one sentence. Holy hell. The construct didn't get a second chance to figure out what had happened to it. Whatever this Voidbinder magic actually was, it didn't like being interrupted mid-transformation, and the moment I fully understood what I'd just done, the rest of the fight ended in about 4 seconds. I won't pretend I remember all of it clearly. I remember dust. I remember a low hum that felt like the world holding its breath. I remember walking out of that dungeon completely alone, completely unnoticed by the guild, with a class the system refused to even name out loud. And I remember making a decision, right there in the mountain air outside the hollow choir, that I was done being invisible on purpose. I just didn't know yet how loud that decision was about to get. The guild had already logged the mission as a partial failure with 1 casualty, meaning me, because Sable's official report claimed I'd been lost in the initial collapse. Convenient. Clean. No blame, no consequences, no shield boy left to complain. So when I walked into the guild hall 3 days later, alive, unharmed, and very much not a casualty, the look on Sable's face was worth every single humiliating day I'd spent behind her for 2 years. "You're supposed to be dead," she said, and I swear the whole hall went quiet. "Yeah," I said. Funny how that works out sometimes. I didn't explain the Voidbinder class. Not yet. Some instinct, maybe the same instinct that had erased that construct's arm, told me showing my full hand right there in a crowded guild hall was a mistake. So instead, I just requested a formal review of the Hollow Choir mission, submitted alongside the memory crystal every guild mage carries during dungeon clears, the one that records everything, whether you want it to or not. Mine recorded everything. The relic grab, the collapse, Torin's 4 final words before the door sealed. All of it. Crystal clear, undeniable. The guildmaster, a scarred old veteran named Oren Reyes who had seen every trick in the book, watched that memory crystal playback with an expression that got colder with every second. When it finished, he looked at Sable, then at Torin, then back at the crystal, and said one sentence that landed harder than anything I could have said myself. "You left a party member to die, and lied about it in an official report. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Because guild politics in Aldermere don't work on fairness, they work on rank, and Sable's family owned half the merchant contracts funding the guild's northern expansion. Oren couldn't strip her rank without risking a war with people who had far more gold than integrity. What he could do, and did, was reassign me out of her party permanently, mark the incident on her record, and quietly recommend I get evaluated for reclassification, given what the memory crystal had shown of my abilities inside that vault. That evaluation is where things got interesting, because the moment the evaluators tested my new class, the results didn't just surprise them, it scared them. Voidbinder magic, according to the ancient archive they had to dig up just to find a reference, hadn't been officially recorded in over 200 years. The last known Voidbinder in Aldermere's history was a man named Corvin Ashwell, who had used the same unmaking power I'd just discovered to single-handedly collapse an entire invading army. And then, 6 months later, turned the same power on the kingdom that had celebrated him as a hero. He wasn't remembered as a legend. He was remembered as the reason an entire province doesn't exist on modern maps anymore. I sat in that evaluation room, listening to an old historian explain, very carefully, very nervously, that my bloodline apparently traced back to the one family that had produced a magic so dangerous the kingdom had spent 2 centuries pretending it never existed. And here I was, the last laughingstock of my graduating class, sitting on the exact same power. "Do you understand," the historian said, "what it means that this power chose you?" I didn't. Not really. But I understood one thing clearly. Everyone who had underestimated me for 2 years was about to have a very bad year. Word doesn't stay quiet in a guild hall, no matter how hard Oren tried to keep the evaluation sealed. Within a week, half of Aldermere's mage community had heard some version of the story, and the versions got wilder every time they got retold. By the time it reached Draven Ash, Golden Boy, first in every ranking, the story had turned into, the failed support caster survived an S-rank collapse alone, which was true, and also somehow not the full picture, which he found deeply annoying. He requested a duel, publicly, in the guild's open arena, where every ranked mage in the city could watch. I said yes, before he even finished the sentence. Here's the thing about internal commentary. I never told anyone at the time. Some small, petty part of me had been waiting 2 years to say yes to exactly this kind of challenge. The morning of the duel, Mira found me in the training yard, the only person from my old party who'd bothered checking on me since the Hollow Choir. She looked like she hadn't slept. I should have grabbed you, she said. I tried. Torin pulled me back and I let him. I told her I understood. I mostly meant it. Trust, once it cracks, doesn't fully seal back up just because someone apologizes, and some small, cold part of me, maybe the Voidbinder part, noted that fact and filed it away for later. Just don't lose today, she said instead. Because apparently that was easier than talking about betrayal. Everyone's going to be watching. She had no idea how right she was. The arena that afternoon was packed wall to wall. Guild members, academy students, even a few nobles who'd heard the rumor and wanted a front row seat to watch the class joke get humiliated one more time for good measure. Draven walked out first, cloak billowing dramatically, the crowd already cheering his name before the match even started. I walked out to dead silence, a few scattered laughs. Someone in the back actually called out "Shield Boy," and the crowd chuckled like it was the funniest thing they'd heard all week. Draven smirked at me from across the arena floor. Try not to embarrass yourself worse than usual. He had absolutely no idea what he'd just signed up for. The match started, and for the first 10 seconds, I let him think it was going exactly the way he expected. He threw a wall of blessed flame at me. Fast, precise, the kind of spell that had ended 100 duels before mine even started. I didn't dodge. I didn't shield. I just reached out and unmade it mid-air, the entire spell collapsing into black dust before it crossed half the arena floor. The cheering stopped. All of it. Every single voice in that stadium went dead silent at once. Draven's smirk didn't disappear right away. It took him one more spell, a lightning lance he'd used to end matches in under 3 seconds his entire career, before the silence turned into something closer to fear. That lance never landed either. I stepped through the space where it should have hit me like it wasn't even there, and the crowd realized, all at once, that they weren't watching an even match. They were watching something they didn't have a name for yet. I won't drag out the fight longer than it actually took, because the truth is, it was over fast. Draven, to his credit, didn't stop trying. He threw everything he had, every spell that had made him first in every ranking since he was 12 years old, and every single one of them met the same fate. Unmade, erased, turned to black dust before they ever touched me. The final exchange happened when he charged in close, blade drawn, desperate, furious, refusing to accept what was happening in front of him. I caught the blade 3 inches from my throat with one hand, and for half a second, I felt that cold second heartbeat pulse through my arm, patient, hungry, waiting for permission I hadn't decided whether to give. I didn't unmake him. I want that on record. Some part of that power wanted to. I didn't let it. Instead, I just twisted the blade out of his grip and let it clatter to the arena floor and said the only thing that felt worth saying after 2 years of being laughed at by everyone in that stadium. Guess the Shield Boy figured something out. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. That should have been my happy ending. Underdog wins, crowd cheers, bullies eat their words, roll credits. It wasn't. Because that's when Oren Reyes pulled me aside after the match, face grim, and told me something that turned my victory into a much bigger problem. The Kingdom's Oversight Council watches every Voidbinder sighting, he said. They've watched for 200 years, waiting for the bloodline to resurface. You didn't just win a duel today, you just told every powerful person in this city exactly what you are. I asked him what that meant for me. It means, he said, some of them are going to want to recruit you, and some of them are going to want to make very sure Corvin Ashwell's story doesn't repeat itself. I didn't fully understand what he meant until 3 nights later, when I woke up to find a masked figure standing at the foot of my bed, close enough to end my life before I even opened my eyes. Close enough that the only reason I woke up at all was that cold second heartbeat flaring inside my chest like a warning bell. I didn't get a name. I didn't get an explanation. I got one sentence, delivered in a voice that had clearly practiced sounding calm while discussing murder. The council sends its regrets. Voidbinders don't get a second chance to burn down a kingdom. Then the window shattered, and I was fighting for my life in my own bedroom, against someone who moved faster than anyone I'd ever seen, faster than Sable, faster than Draven, someone who clearly wasn't here to duel me for pride. They were here to make sure the last Voidbinder in Aldermere never got old enough to become the next Corvin Ashwell. I want to tell you I won that fight cleanly. I didn't. I got a blade across my forearm before I managed to get enough distance to actually use the power properly, and by the time I turned the assassin's weapon to black dust mid-swing, they'd already vanished back through the broken window into the night, leaving nothing behind but a torn scrap of fabric and one final whispered warning that chilled me more than the attack itself. You're not the only one they've sent for. And Rhett Calder isn't hard to find, my sister's name, in a stranger's mouth, threatening the one person in this entire world I would burn a kingdom down to protect. That's the moment 2 years of being underestimated stopped feeling like an insult and started feeling like the least of my problems. Because somewhere out there, an organization old enough to have hunted my bloodline for 2 centuries had just decided I was worth killing before I finished growing into whatever Corvin Ashwell had become. And somewhere in an orphan ward across the city, my sister was asleep, completely unaware that the brother she thought was just a mage was actually the reason people with masks and knives were about to start watching her every move. I didn't wait for morning. I wrapped my forearm in a torn strip of bedsheet, grabbed the one bag I owned that actually mattered, and ran straight for the orphan ward on the other side of the city, because there was no version of that night where I slept another hour without seeing Ren's face with my own eyes first. The streets were empty at that hour, just lantern light and fog rolling off the river, and every shadow along the way made my pulse spike. I kept expecting another masked figure to step out from an alley. None did. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. It just meant I had no idea where the next attack was actually going to come from, and that uncertainty was worse than the fight itself. I reached the ward just as the sky started turning gray at the edges, and the caretaker on night duty, an old woman named Hetty who'd known me since I was 7, took one look at my bandaged arm and my face and didn't ask a single question. She just let me in. Ren was asleep in the 3rd bed from the window, exactly where she always slept, one arm hanging off the mattress, like she'd been reaching for something in her dreams. I stood in that doorway longer than I probably should have, just watching her breathe, thinking about a stranger's voice saying her name like a threat instead of a person. I didn't wake her. I couldn't make myself do it. Couldn't make myself put that fear into an 11-year-old who still thought her brother was just a mage with a boring job. Instead, I found Hetty again and told her, as calmly as I could manage with my hands still shaking, that Ren needed to be moved somewhere safer, somewhere with better wards, somewhere I could pay for now that I actually had guild credit worth something. Hetty didn't ask why. She'd worked in that ward long enough to know that when a mage shows up bleeding at dawn, asking about wards for a child, you don't ask why. You just help. By the time the sun came up fully, I'd arranged a transfer, paid more of my guild credit than I probably should have in one morning, and made a promise to myself that whatever the council wanted from a Voidbinder, they were not getting anywhere near my sister to find out. Then I went back to my own apartment and found Mira waiting outside my door, arms crossed, looking like she'd been standing there for an hour. "You look terrible," she said. "Rough night. The whole guild is talking about the duel. Nobody's talking about anything else." She studied my face for a long moment, and whatever she saw there made her tone shift completely. "That's not what this is about, is it?" I almost lied. Some old habit, 2 years deep, told me to just say I was fine and let her walk away thinking the duel was the whole story. But she'd been the one person who never fully abandoned me, even when she should have, even when Torin pulled her the wrong direction in that collapsing vault, and something about that finally cracked the wall I'd been keeping up around this entire mess. So I told her. All of it. The masked figure, the council, my sister's name in a stranger's mouth. Mira went pale somewhere around the part where the window shattered, and didn't say a single word until I finished. "You need people who can actually protect you," she finally said. "Not a duel-winning reputation. People? I don't have people. I have a sister and a bag I packed at 3 in the morning. You have me," she said, like it was obvious, like 2 years of watching me get treated like furniture hadn't happened at all. That's a start. I didn't have a clever response for that. For once, the sarcastic internal commentary I'd been running non-stop since the hollow choir just went quiet, and I let myself feel, for about 5 full seconds, like maybe I wasn't as alone in this as the last 2 years had convinced me I was. Then Oren Reyes found us both in the hallway, face grim in a way that told me the 5 seconds of peace were officially over. "The council's sent a formal notice," he said, holding out a sealed letter with a wax stamp I didn't recognize, some kind of eye wrapped in chains. "They're not hiding anymore. You embarrassed one of their agents last night and survived, which apparently makes you interesting instead of disposable." "Interesting how?" "They want to test you properly," Oren said. "Officially. A sanctioned trial, 3 days from now, inside a sealed arena built specifically to contain whatever a Voidbinder can actually do at full strength." I asked him what happened if I refused. His answer didn't leave much room for comfort. Then they stop asking nicely and start hunting you, the way they hunted Corvin Ashwell, before he ever got the chance to become the thing they were afraid of. Refusing the trial doesn't make you safe. It just makes the next attack bigger than the last one. I looked at that sealed letter for a long time before I finally took it from his hand, feeling that cold second heartbeat pulse once, slow and steady, almost like it approved. I stood there in my wrecked bedroom doorway one more time that morning, forearms still throbbing under the bandage, and made the only decision that made any sense at all. I wasn't running from this power anymore. I wasn't hiding it, apologizing for it, or letting anyone tell me it made me worthless ever again. If the council wanted to test what a Voidbinder could become, I was going to give them a very good reason to regret asking. Because they'd made one mistake nobody in Aldermere seemed capable of avoiding. They underestimated me right up until the moment it was already too late to take it back. The chains around the arena floor snapped like they were made of string, not reinforced steel forged specifically to hold a Voidbinder in place. I didn't mean to do it. That's the part that scared me more than the officials screaming behind reinforced glass 3 stories up. I flinched, just flinched, and half a ton of enchanted containment shackle turned to black dust before it hit the ground. Somewhere above me, an alarm started shrieking loud enough to hurt. 3 days earlier, I would have called that impossible. Now I just stood there in the wreckage of my own restraints, breathing hard, thinking one very clear thought. Well, that's not good. Let me back up, because you need to understand exactly how I ended up standing alone in a terrena built to contain something the kingdom had spent 200 years being afraid of. The council's letter had said 3 days. It felt like 3 hours. Between Oren walking me through what a sanctioned trial actually meant, Mira refusing to leave my side no matter how many times I told her it wasn't safe, and a night spent lying awake wondering if a masked figure was going to come through my window again, 3 days evaporated fast. The trial site wasn't in Aldermere proper. They moved me at dawn, blindfolded, which felt insulting until Oren quietly explained that even he didn't know the arena's exact location, and that was apparently the point. The council didn't trust anyone, not their own guild masters, not their own examiners, and definitely not the last living Voidbinder in 200 years. When they finally pulled the blindfold off, I was standing in the center of a stone circle, easily the size of Aldermere's entire training yard, sunk 50 feet below ground, ringed with runes that pulsed faint silver in the dim light. Above me, a wall of reinforced glass wrapped the entire upper level, and behind that glass stood a row of council officials in dark robes, watching me the way you'd watch a caged animal you weren't entirely sure was caged well enough. "Rhett Calder," said a voice through some kind of enchanted speaker, flat and clinical. "You stand accused of nothing. This is a trial of measurement, not judgment. Cooperate, and this concludes quickly." I almost laughed. Nothing about that sentence sounded like it was going to conclude quickly. The examiner walked out from a side passage a moment later, and I nearly missed the detail that mattered most about her, because on the surface, she looked exactly like what I expected. Middle-aged, sharp-eyed, council robes, a clipboard of runic parchment tucked under one arm, like she did this every week. Her name, she said, was Aveline Thorne. "No relation to Mira," she added immediately, like she'd read the flicker of recognition on my face before I even fully processed the surname. "I'll be conducting your assessment," she said. 3 phases: restraint, output, and control. Try not to die in the first one. It reflects badly on my paperwork. Dry, almost sarcastic. Definitely not what I expected from someone working for the organization that had sent an assassin through my bedroom window 3 nights earlier. "Funny," I said, "given who sent me here." Something flickered across her face, there and gone so fast I almost missed it. "I didn't send anyone anywhere, Mr. Calder. I test what the council brings me. What they do with the results isn't my department." That answer should have reassured me. It didn't. It just told me the people running this show weren't one single unified will. They were factions, wearing the same robes, pointed in different directions, and I had just become the exact thing they were all arguing about. Phase 1 started without much ceremony. Restraint. Aveline gestured, and the runes ringing the arena floor lit up gold, and 6 chains shot out from hidden channels in the stone, wrapping around my wrists, my ankles, my throat, pinning me in place before I even had time to react. The metal burned cold against my skin, laced with some kind of suppression enchantment I could feel pressing against that second heartbeat in my chest, like a hand trying to smother a candle. These restraints have held Sokran combat mages without issue, Aveline said, voice carrying up to the observation deck as much as to me. We're measuring the threshold at which Voidbinder physiology exceeds standard containment. I felt the chains tighten, felt the suppression enchantment dig deeper, trying to choke that cold pulse into silence. And that's when it happened. Not because I fought back, because I flinched, purely instinctive, the same way you'd flinch from a hand closing around your throat, and the power just answered like it had been waiting for permission the whole time. The chains didn't break, they unmade. All 6 at once, gone to black dust in under a second, and the suppression rune array etched into the floor beneath me, cracked down the middle, like it had been hit by something 100 times stronger than anything it was built to withstand. Silence. Then the alarm. Then absolute chaos in the observation deck above me. Robed officials shouting over each other. Someone slamming a hand against the reinforced glass hard enough that I heard it from 50 feet below. Aveline didn't move. She just stared at the black dust where 6 enchanted restraint chains used to be, and wrote something on her clipboard with a hand that wasn't entirely steady. Interesting, she said quietly, like she was talking to herself instead of me. That's roughly where we started this story. Now let's keep going, because Phase 1 turned out to be the calm part of the day. The alarm kept blaring for almost a full minute before someone up in the observation deck finally silenced it, and in that minute, I stood in the wreckage of the containment array, cold dust settling around my boots, feeling every eye behind that glass locked directly on me. I didn't move. Some instinct told me moving fast right now, with restraint failsafes already broken, would look a lot more like an escape attempt than it actually was. Examiner Thorn, barked a voice through the speaker system, sharper than the first. Initiate Phase 2 containment protocol immediately. With respect, Aveline said, not even looking up from her clipboard. Protocol 1 just failed at 40% capacity. Escalating straight to Phase 2 output testing, without addressing that gap, isn't measurement. It's provocation. That is not your decision. It's literally my job, she said, and something in her tone told me this wasn't the first argument she'd ever had with whoever was speaking through that intercom. You want data. Reckless escalation gets you a body count, not data. There was a long pause. Then, Calder, proceed to Phase 2. That is the Council's order, not a request. Aveline's jaw tightened for half a second. Then she looked at me directly for the first time since the chains disintegrated, and something in her expression shifted into something almost apologetic. Phase 2 measures output under directed pressure, she said, loud enough for the deck to hear, quiet enough that I understood the words underneath the words. I need you to demonstrate control, Mr. Calder. Not raw power. Control. Do you understand the difference? I understood exactly what she was actually telling me. Don't give them a reason to panic. I understand, I said. The arena floor shifted beneath us, stone panels sliding away to reveal a ring of golem constructs rising up from beneath the ground. 6 of them, each carved from the same black stone as the guardian I'd disintegrated back in the hollow choir. They powered up in sequence, eyes lighting gold one after another, and I felt that cold second heartbeat stir in my chest, like it recognized the shape of a fight before I did. Destroy them, Aveline said. One at a time, show restraint between each. That's the test. Simple instructions. I actually managed the first 3 constructs exactly the way she wanted. A controlled pulse of unmaking, aimed precisely at each one's core, nothing wasted, nothing spilling past the target. I felt the officials up in the deck relax slightly, with each clean, contained demonstration. I felt Aveline's shoulders loosen just a fraction. Then construct 4 charged instead of waiting its turn, some fail-safe glitch or maybe just bad timing, and it came at me faster than the first 3 combined, fist already swinging before I'd fully reset my stance. I didn't panic. I want that on record. I made a controlled decision, the same kind of decision that had saved my life against that guardian construct weeks earlier, and I aimed a precise, narrow pulse directly at its swinging arm. It should have unmade the arm cleanly. Instead, the pulse rippled outward wider than I intended, the cold heartbeat in my chest suddenly loud and hungry in a way it hadn't been during the first 3. And instead of one construct losing an arm, all 4 remaining constructs disintegrated in the same half-second, along with a 10-foot section of the arena's outer wall behind them. The wall wasn't supposed to be part of the test. Stone dust rolled outward in a wave, and through the haze I heard the alarm shriek back to full volume. Heard officials up in the deck shouting words like containment breach and termination authorization. Heard, distantly, a voice that might have been Mira's, sharp with panic, before someone shushed her hard. Wait. Mira. I turned toward the observation deck fast enough that Aveline flinched, and through the reinforced glass, past the crowd of robed officials now scrambling toward some kind of emergency console, I caught a flash of familiar dark hair pressed against the far edge of the window. She wasn't supposed to be here. Oren had specifically told her to stay in Aldermere, stay safe, stay far away from whatever the council decided to do with me today. She'd promised him she would. She'd lied. Of course she had. Rhett! Her voice carried down through some gap in the containment field, thin and desperate. Rhett, are you? Silence the deck, snapped the cold voice from earlier, and the sound cut off completely, like someone had slammed a hand over the entire observation level. I felt something in my chest go tight that had nothing to do with the Voidbinder power at all. She shouldn't be here, I said to Aveline, low and urgent. No, Aveline agreed, and for the first time all day, she looked genuinely rattled instead of clinically detached. She shouldn't. And you, destroying half my arena in front of the council's most paranoid faction, is about to make her presence here a lot more dangerous than it already was. Great, just great. I forced myself to breathe, forced that cold heartbeat back down to something quieter, and looked at the wreckage around me. 6 constructs gone, a section of reinforced wall gone, restraint chains built for S-rank combat mages, gone in under a second flat. How bad is this? I asked, on a scale of you writing a stern paragraph in your report, to you writing my death sentence. Aveline didn't answer right away. She looked up at the observation deck instead, where the shouting behind the silenced glass had turned into something that looked a lot like 2 separate groups of officials arguing with each other, instead of at me. Closer to the second one, she said quietly, which is exactly why we need to finish Phase 3 before that argument up there resolves itself in the wrong direction. Phase 3, she explained fast. Low, almost too quiet for the deck's remaining sensors to catch, was supposed to measure control under emotional duress. A structured scenario, a controlled variable, something designed to see whether a Voidbinder's power responded to calm precision or spiraled under pressure. Given what had just happened with 4 constructs and a wall, I already knew which answer they were expecting. There isn't a controlled version of this left to run, Aveline said. Not with half the arena in dust, and your friend already compromising the deck's security. So here's what we're actually going to do instead. She lowered her clipboard, and for one unguarded second, the clinical examiner mask slipped entirely, replaced by something that looked almost like sympathy. I'm going to walk you through the last phase in a way that makes you look controlled enough that the recruitment faction up there has ammunition to argue with the elimination faction, she said. Because right now, Mr. Calder, that argument is the only thing standing between you and a termination order. And I'd genuinely rather it not come to that. Why? I asked. You don't know me. You work for the people hunting me. Aveline's expression went distant for a moment, somewhere far past the arena, past the observation deck, past whatever year we were currently standing in. I worked under the last examiner who ran a Voidbinder trial, she said quietly. 200 years ago, obviously not personally, but the methods, the protocols, the fear, all of it's been passed down exactly the same, generation after generation, examiner after examiner. Like scripture, nobody's allowed to question. I've read Corvin Ashwell's original assessment file, word for word. Do you know what it said about him before he ever became what the history books remember him as? I shook my head. It said he showed remarkable restraint under pressure, she said. That's the exact phrase. Remarkable restraint, and 6 months later, the council decided restraint wasn't enough reassurance, and they moved against him anyway, and everyone's spent 2 centuries since then pretending his fall proves the fear was justified instead of proving it caused itself. The words hit somewhere I wasn't prepared for. I thought about the historian back in Aldermere, nervous and careful, explaining that Corvin hadn't just gone bad on his own, that something about the story never quite added up. You think they're going to do it again? I said. Whatever they did to him. I think, Aveline said, very carefully, choosing each word like it might get her killed for saying it out loud, that a scared institution, given 200 years to justify its fear, will always find new evidence to support the conclusion it already decided on. And I think you just gave them a very large piece of evidence by turning a reinforced containment wall into dust in front of the entire assessment board. That's when the intercom crackled back to life, and the cold voice from earlier returned, sharper now, edged with something that sounded a lot like fear wearing the mask of authority. Examiner Thorne, step away from the subject. Immediately. Aveline didn't move. Phase 3 isn't complete. Phase 3 is irrelevant, the voice snapped. The subject has demonstrated output exceeding every containment threshold on record. This assessment is concluded. I felt the arena floor shift again beneath my boots, more runes lighting up around the perimeter, different from the restraint chains, glowing a deep, angry red instead of the earlier gold. That's not a containment array, Aveline said. Quiet, urgent, no longer performing calm for the deck's benefit. That's a suppression field. Full spectrum. It's not built to hold you, Rhett. It's built to shut you down completely. Long enough for... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I understood exactly what came after a suppression field finished shutting a threat down completely, and it wasn't a polite escort back to Aldermere. The red runes flared brighter, and I felt that cold second heartbeat suddenly seize under pressure I hadn't felt since the assassin's blade caught my forearm 3 nights ago, like something enormous and invisible was closing a fist around the core of what made me a Voidbinder in the first place. Rhett! Aveline started, and that's when the observation deck's silenced glass shattered from the inside, not from anything I did, but from the unmistakable sound of Mira Thorne throwing something enchanted and explosive directly at the console controlling the suppression field, because apparently my one visit from an assassin hadn't taught either of us the meaning of staying out of danger. The console sparked, half the red runes flickered out, and through the broken glass 30 feet above me, I heard her voice ring out clear across the entire arena for the first time since they'd silenced her. He is not a weapon for you to shut down like an experiment. Every official on that deck spun toward her at once. I felt the suppression field stutter, half its power gone, and through the haze of dust and failing enchantment, I finally understood exactly how deep this council's fracture actually ran, because half the officials up there were reaching for Mira like she'd just committed treason, and the other half were staring at the failing suppression console like they were relieved someone had finally broken it. This is exactly the argument I was trying to buy you time for, Aveline muttered beside me, watching the chaos unfold above with something between horror and grim satisfaction, except considerably louder and considerably faster than I intended. The suppression field died completely a second later, the last of the red runes going dark, and that cold heartbeat in my chest surged back to full strength so fast it staggered me half a step. Raw and furious, and very much done being smothered by anyone's enchanted machinery. Up in the deck, the arguing had turned into shouting, robed officials splitting visibly into 2 clumps on either side of the shattered window, one side gesturing at me with expressions of pure alarm, the other side gesturing at the broken suppression console with expressions that looked almost like vindication. You see what happens, one official was shouting, loud enough now that the whole arena could hear it clearly. When you try to cage something like that, it doesn't submit, it escalates. Which is exactly why elimination was always the only responsible option, another voice snapped back. We had 200 years of precedent and you people insisted on testing it anyway. Elimination didn't work the first time either. A third voice cut in, colder, more measured than the first 2. Corvin Ashwell wasn't eliminated. He was provoked into becoming exactly what we feared, by the very people arguing to eliminate him. I, for one, am not interested in watching history repeat a mistake we made ourselves. That third voice belonged to someone I couldn't see clearly through the dust and the broken glass, but something about the careful, deliberate way they spoke made every other voice on that deck go quiet for a second, before the shouting resumed twice as loud. Aveline turned to me, her clipboard hanging forgotten at her side, dust settling in her hair, and said the only thing that mattered in that entire chaotic moment, that third voice, she said quietly, is the recruitment faction's leader. And she just publicly staked her position on keeping you alive in front of the entire assessment board. That's either the best thing that's happened to you today, or it's about to get you both killed, depending entirely on how this vote goes in the next 5 minutes. I looked up at the shattered window, at Mira, standing frozen in the middle of 2 factions screaming past her in both directions, at the dust from an unmade wall still settling around my boots, and thought about Ren asleep in her new safe house, completely unaware that somewhere 50 feet underground, an entire council was deciding in real time whether her brother deserved to live long enough to see her again. The shouting above finally started to organize into something with structure. Officials pulling back from the broken glass, robes swirling as they split cleanly down an invisible line into two distinct groups, facing each other instead of facing down at me. A vote, Aveline said under her breath, watching the formation with an expression I couldn't quite read. They're actually going to vote. Right here, right now. Vote on what? I said, though some cold, patient part of me already knew exactly what the answer was going to be. She didn't get the chance to answer, because the cold voice from earlier, the one that had ordered the suppression field in the first place, cut through the arena one final time, flat and absolute, carrying down from the shattered window like a verdict already decided long before this trial had ever started. Full council vote, effective immediately. Faction 1 proposes termination of the subject before nightfall. Faction 2 proposes conditional recruitment under direct oversight. A pause. Long enough that I could hear my own pulse in my ears, that cold second heartbeat matching it beat for beat. The council, the voice finished, is currently split. Exactly. Down the middle.